The needle sank deep into the unconscious man's arm, and the tall stranger in the tailored suit smiled as if he were doing the whole world a favor. "Nobody misses a king once he's buried," he whispered to his partner, wiping the syringe clean like a man who had done this many times before. He didn't hurry. He didn't panic. He simply watched the body go still on the wet concrete, then straightened his cufflinks. What that cold, smiling man in the expensive suit did not know was that a poor, exhausted waitress had already seen everything. Before we go further, I want to ask you one small thing. If stories about loyalty, betrayal, and ordinary people who change everything move your heart, please subscribe to this channel and stay with me all the way to the end, because this story becomes something you will not expect. And leave a comment telling me the name of the city where you are watching from right now so I can see just how far this little story has traveled around the world. Now let us begin. Emily Carter had learned a long time ago how to make herself small. She had learned it the way poor people always learn it quietly without anyone teaching her. You kept your eyes down. You didn't ask questions. You minded your own business, and you got home safe. And if something looked wrong, you told yourself it was none of your concern, and you kept walking. That was the rule. That was how a 27-year-old waitress with almost no money and almost no protection survived in a city like Chicago. And that night, standing frozen in the shadows behind the restaurant where she worked, Emily knew exactly what the rule demanded of her. Turn around, walk away, pretend she had seen nothing. But her feet would not move. Her shift had ended 20 minutes earlier. It had been a brutal night, table after table of impatient customers, one of them snapping his fingers at her like she was a dog, another sending back a steak 3 times, and then leaving without a tip. Her feet throbbed. Her lower back ached in that deep way that never fully went away anymore. She had counted her tips in the cramped little locker room, folding the crumpled bills over and over, doing the same desperate math she did every single night. Rent, electricity, and Noah's medicine always. Noah's medicine, the small orange bottle that emptied so much faster than her wallet could fill it. She had walked out the back exit into the cold because it was faster to reach the bus stop that way, cutting through the covered lot behind the building. That was all. She was thinking about her brother. She was thinking about whether she could stretch this week's grocery money if she skipped lunch for a few days. She was not thinking about danger. Then she heard the voices. 2 men, low, controlled voices that did not belong to drunk customers or lost tourists. Something about the tone made the hair rise on the back of her neck before her mind even understood why. She pressed herself back against a concrete pillar, her heart suddenly slamming, and she looked. A black SUV, its back door hanging open, and 2 men in dark, beautiful suits, the kind of suits that cost more than Emily made in 3 months, dragging a 3rd man out of the vehicle by his arms. The 3rd man's legs trailed uselessly across the ground. His head hung forward. He was not walking. He was not helping them. He was completely limp, a heavy weight between them, and the 2 men handled him with the careless efficiency of people moving furniture. Emily's breath caught in her throat. "Hold him still," one of the men muttered. "He's out, Marcus. He's not going anywhere. Just hold him." She watched, unable to look away, as the taller of the 2, the one they called Marcus, reached into his jacket and pulled out something small. It caught the dim overhead light for just a moment. A syringe, a needle. Emily's stomach dropped straight through the floor of her body. "You sure about the dose?" the 2nd man asked. "I've done this before," Marcus said, and there was a lazy confidence in his voice that was somehow more frightening than anger would have been. "By the time anyone finds him, if anyone finds him, it'll look like his heart just gave out. Poor man, all that stress." He almost laughed. "Nobody misses a king once he's buried." Then he pushed the needle into the unconscious man's arm. Emily wanted to scream. Every nerve in her body screamed at her to do something, to shout, to run, to call for help. But her voice was gone. Her hands had gone numb. She stood pinned to the pillar, watching 2 men murder a stranger 15 feet away from her, and she could not make a single sound. The unconscious man's body twitched once. Then it went completely still. "There," Marcus said softly. He straightened up. He wiped the needle with a small cloth, folded the cloth, and slipped both back into his jacket like a man putting away a pen after signing a letter. That's the end of Adrian Blackwell. 20 years of everybody being terrified of him, and it ends in a parking lot behind a restaurant. Almost feels too easy. Victor's going to be happy. Victor's going to own this whole city by morning, Marcus said. Come on, leave him where the delivery crew won't find him till the lot opens. Let's go. The two men turned, and Emily in that frozen instant understood that they were about to walk directly past the pillar she was hiding behind. She stopped breathing entirely. She squeezed her eyes shut like a child, as if not seeing them would make them not see her. She heard their expensive shoes clicking against the concrete, coming closer. She heard Marcus say something she couldn't make out. She heard the other man laugh, and then they passed. They did not look. They climbed back into the black SUV. The engine growled to life, and the vehicle rolled up the ramp and out into the Chicago night, its taillights vanishing into the rain. Emily stayed frozen for a long moment. Then her knees buckled, and she slid down the pillar until she was crouched on the cold ground, shaking so hard her teeth chattered. She should leave. That was the rule. Every part of her that had spent 27 years learning how to survive was shouting it at her now. She had witnessed a murder. She had seen the faces of the men who did it. If they ever found out she had been standing here, they would kill her too, and probably her brother, and there would be no one left in the world to care that they were gone. The smart thing, the only sane thing, was to get up, walk to the bus stop, go home, and never ever tell a single soul what she had seen. She actually stood up to do it. She actually took 2 steps toward the ramp, and then she heard it. A breath. A wet, ragged, desperate breath coming from the man on the ground. Emily stopped dead. She turned around slowly. The man they had left for dead was lying on his side, one arm bent beneath him at an awkward angle. And his chest, faintly barely, was rising and falling. He was still alive. No, Emily whispered to herself. No. Not my problem. Not my problem. She said it out loud as if hearing her own voice might convince her. This was exactly the kind of situation the rule existed for. This man was a criminal. Marcus had said his name, Adrian Blackwell. Even Emily, who paid no attention to that world, had heard that name before, spoken in hushed tones by kitchen staff and delivery drivers, a name people said the way they said the name of a hurricane. Powerful, dangerous, untouchable. Whatever was happening between him and the men who had tried to kill him, it was a war between monsters and ordinary people who got caught in a war between monsters, ended up dead. Walk away, the rules said. He's a criminal. He's dying anyway. There's nothing you can do. You have a brother who needs you. Walk away. Emily took another step toward the ramp. The man on the ground made a small, broken sound. It was not a word. It was barely even human. It was just the sound of something alive fighting not to die. And Emily, standing there in the cold, thought about her brother. She thought about Noah lying in his hospital bed 8 months ago, so small and so pale, his lips a terrible shade of blue, machines beeping all around him. She thought about how she had begged God or fate or whatever was listening to let someone care, to let someone help, to not let her little brother be just another poor kid who died because nobody thought his life was worth the trouble. She thought about how alone she had felt, holding his cold hand, praying for a single stranger in the world to see him as a person instead of a problem. And she looked at the dying man on the ground, this stranger, this criminal, this monster, and she saw a person fighting not to die. "Oh, God, help me," Emily whispered. And she ran to him. She dropped to her knees on the wet concrete beside him. Up close, he looked worse. His skin had gone gray. There was a sheen of sweat on his forehead despite the cold. His breathing was shallow and irregular, catching and stuttering. Whatever poison Marcus had put into him was working. "Hey," Emily said, her voice shaking. "Hey, can you hear me? Sir, stay with me. Please stay with me." The man's eyelids fluttered but did not open. Emily's mind raced. Call an ambulance. That was the obvious answer, the correct answer. But even as the thought formed, a colder thought pushed in behind it. If she called an ambulance, there would be records, police, questions. The 2 men who did this were part of something big, something with money and reach, and Emily had seen their faces. If they found out a witness had saved the man they tried to kill, they would come looking for that witness. And she had no protection, no power, nothing. But she couldn't just let him die. Her hands hovered over him useless, and then buried under the layers of panic, an old memory surfaced. A first aid class she had taken years ago, back when her life still had room for classes and plans and a future. She remembered a phrase: "If someone has been poisoned or overdosed, keep them breathing. Keep them warm. Get them somewhere safe. Do not leave them alone." "Okay," Emily breathed. "Okay, I've got you. I've got you." She looked at him again and made her decision. She would not call an ambulance because an ambulance would be a death sentence for both of them. She would take him somewhere those men would never look. She would take him home. It was insane. She knew it was insane even as she thought it. He was a grown man, easily twice her weight in muscle. She was 5'4" and exhausted and running on almost no food. There was no possible way she could carry him. But her apartment was only 3 blocks away, and she was stubborn in a way that only people who have never once in their lives been allowed to give up can be stubborn. "Come on," she said through gritted teeth, grabbing him under his arms the way she had seen Marcus do it. "Come on, you big, heavy, terrible man. We're going to do this. You're going to help me even if you're unconscious. Do you hear me?" She pulled. He didn't move. She pulled harder, throwing her whole body weight backward, and slowly, his upper body lifted off the ground. What followed was the longest 20 minutes of Emily Carter's life. She half dragged, half carried him out of the lot and into the rain. Every few feet she had to stop gasping, her arms screaming, her back on fire. She kept talking to him the entire time, a steady stream of words, partly to keep herself moving, and partly because some deep instinct told her that a dying person should not be surrounded by silence. "Almost there," she lied when they were not almost there at all. "You're doing great. All you have to do is keep breathing. Just keep breathing for me. I don't even know you. I don't know why I'm doing this. My brother would say I've completely lost my mind, and he'd be right. But you're not going to die tonight. Not while I'm here. Not on my watch." Twice she nearly gave up. Once when a car turned onto the street, and she had to drag him into the shadow of a doorway and crouch there, her heart hammering, praying it wasn't the black SUV coming back. The car passed. It wasn't them. She let out a breath and kept going. The second time was worse. She simply ran out of strength. She sat down hard on the wet sidewalk with the unconscious man slumped against her, and for one terrible moment she felt herself starting to cry, the exhaustion and terror and impossibility of it all crashing over her at once. "I can't," she whispered. "I can't do this. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I can't." And then the man made that sound again, that small, broken fighting sound, still alive, still fighting. Emily wiped her face with the back of her wrist. "Fine," she said. "Fine. If you're not giving up, then neither am I." She got him up again, and somehow God only knew how she got him the rest of the way. Her building was old and the elevator had been broken for 2 years, so she dragged him up 3 flights of stairs, one agonizing step at a time. By the time she got him through her apartment door and lowered him onto her narrow bed, her arms had gone completely numb, and she was soaked through with rain and sweat and shaking so violently she could barely stand. She stood there in the dim light of her tiny apartment, staring down at the unconscious man in her bed, and the full weight of what she had done finally landed on her. There was a criminal in her home, a man the whole city was afraid of, a man someone with power and money had just tried very hard to murder. And she, Emily Carter, poor waitress sister, nobody had just made herself part of a war she did not understand. "What have I done?" she breathed. But there was no time to fall apart. The man's breathing had gotten worse. She grabbed extra blankets and piled them on him to keep him warm. She fetched a cold cloth and pressed it to his sweating forehead. She checked his pulse the way she'd learned in that long-ago class, pressing 2 fingers to his throat, and felt it fluttering weak and too fast. But there. "Come on," she murmured over and over through the long hours of that night. "Come on, stay with me. Fight. Whatever you did, whoever you are, you fight." She did not sleep. She sat in the wooden chair beside her own bed, and she watched a stranger's chest rise and fall, and every time it seemed to falter, she leaned forward and spoke to him, called him back, refused to let him slip away. She did not even know his name for certain. She only had what Marcus had said. Adrian Blackwell. She turned the name over in her mind. It meant nothing to her except danger. Somewhere around 3 in the morning, the worst seemed to pass. His breathing steadied. The gray color began to leave his skin. The fever broke his forehead, cooling under her cloth. Emily, watching, felt something in her own chest unclench for the first time in hours. "You're going to make it," she whispered, hardly believing it. "You stubborn, terrible man. You're going to make it." She must have finally drifted off in the chair, because she woke with a start to gray morning light and the sensation of being watched. Her eyes flew open. The man in her bed was awake, and he was staring at her. Emily's breath stopped, because the eyes looking at her were not the eyes of a helpless, dying stranger. They were sharp, cold, fully alert. They moved over her, then over the room, taking in every detail with the swift, calculating precision of a predator assessing a threat. In an instant, she understood in a way she had not understood before exactly what kind of man she had brought into her home. Neither of them moved. Neither of them spoke. Then the man said in a low, rough voice, "Who are you?" It was not a question exactly. It was a demand. Emily's mouth had gone dry. My name is Emily. Emily Carter." His eyes narrowed. "Where am I?" "My apartment. You're safe. Nobody knows you're here." He tried to sit up. His body clearly did not want to cooperate, and a flash of pain crossed his face, but he pushed through it, dragging himself up against the headboard, so that he was upright, so that he was no longer lying vulnerable beneath her. Even weak, even poisoned, even half dead, he refused to let himself be seen as helpless. Emily noticed that. She would remember it later. "How did I get here?" he said. "I brought you." "You brought me." His eyes flicked over her again, taking in her small frame, her thin arms. Disbelief and suspicion warred across his features. "You. I know how it sounds." "From where?" Emily swallowed. She was suddenly very aware that she was alone in a tiny room with a man who, according to everything she'd ever heard, killed people. "From the parking lot, behind the restaurant where I work, on Halsted." She watched his face change as she spoke, watched something go very still and very dangerous in his expression. "There were 2 men. They dragged you out of a car. They put something in your arm, and then they left you there, to die." The silence that followed was absolute. "You saw them," Adrian Blackwell said quietly. "Yes. Their faces." Emily hesitated. Every instinct told her to lie, to say no, to make herself less useful and therefore less dangerous to keep alive. But she was too tired to lie, and something in her refused to. One of them was called Marcus. Tall, dark hair. The other one didn't say a name. "Marcus, he's the one who used the needle," he said. She stopped. "He said what?" Adrian's voice was very soft now. Somehow that was worse than shouting. "He said nobody misses a king once he's buried." Emily's voice dropped to almost nothing. "And he said someone named Victor was going to own the whole city by morning." For a long moment, Adrian Blackwell did not move at all. His face had gone completely blank, wiped clean of everything, and only his eyes were alive, and what was in them was so cold that Emily felt it like a physical chill. Whatever that name meant to him, it meant everything. Then he looked back at her, and the calculation returned sharper than before. "Why?" he said. "Why what? Why did you save me?" He leaned forward slightly, ignoring the pain it clearly caused him, his eyes boring into hers. "You saw 2 men kill someone. The smart thing, the only sane thing, was to walk away and forget it. Instead, you dragged a stranger 3 blocks and hid him in your home and sat up all night keeping him alive. Why?" And there it was. The suspicion. Emily understood it even then. This was a man who had learned somewhere along the way that no one did anything without a reason, that every kindness was a transaction, that anyone who helped you was simply someone who hadn't yet named their price. "I don't know," she said honestly. "That's not an answer. It's the only one I have." Emily rubbed her exhausted eyes. "I heard you breathing. I knew you were still alive. And I couldn't." She stopped searching for words. "I have a brother. He was really sick last year. He almost died. And I remember praying that anybody would see him as a person worth saving instead of just a poor kid who wasn't worth the trouble. And when I saw you lying there, I don't know, I couldn't be the person who walks away, that's all. There's no reason smarter than that. I'm sorry if that's not the answer you wanted." Adrian stared at her. "You want something," he said, but it came out less certain than before. "I want you to not die in my apartment," Emily said with a flash of exhausted honesty that surprised them both. "And I want you to leave before those men find out I helped you, because if they do, they'll kill me, and I have a brother who needs me. That's what I want. I don't want your money. I don't even know who you are, not really. I just know your name and that people are scared of you. That's it." Something shifted in Adrian Blackwell's face then. It was small, almost invisible, but Emily saw it. It was the look of a man who had spent his entire life waiting for the catch, the angle, the hidden knife, and who was for the first time in longer than he could remember failing to find one. He looked at her small, tired face. He looked at the broken furniture and the water-stained walls of the tiny apartment. He looked at the empty pill bottle on the counter and the two mismatched chairs and everything about the place that spoke of a person who had nothing, who was scraping by, who could have named any price in the world, and instead had asked only that he not die on her floor. And Adrian Blackwell, the most feared man in Chicago, a man who had been betrayed so many times he had stopped counting, felt something he had not felt in 20 years. He didn't have a name for it yet, but it was the beginning of trust. "Emily Carter," he said slowly, testing the name. "Yes. You have no idea what you've done. I saved your life," she said. "You did more than that." His eyes were still cold, but there was something new underneath the cold now, something almost like wonder. "You made yourself the only person in this city I have any reason to believe, and you did it by accident, by being foolish enough to care about a stranger." He let out a breath that was almost a laugh, though there was no humor in it. "Do you have any idea how rare you are? Do you know how long it's been since anyone helped me without wanting something?" Emily didn't answer. She didn't know what to say. Adrian leaned his head back against the wall and closed his eyes for a moment, gathering himself. When he opened them again, the sharpness had hardened into resolve. "The men who did this to me," he said. "Marcus, and the one you didn't get a name for. They didn't come from the outside. They're mine. They're my people. Marcus has worked for me for 8 years. His jaw tightened. "And Victor." The name he said. "Victor Hale is my closest friend. My right hand. The man I trusted more than anyone alive." A terrible stillness settled over him. "I built an empire in this city, 20 years. And every single day of those 20 years, the man planning to kill me and take it all was standing right beside me, smiling." Emily felt a chill run down her spine. "I spent my whole life," Adrian said very quietly, "believing that I controlled this city, that I saw every threat coming, that no one could touch me." He looked at her. "And the truth is, the only reason I'm alive this morning is a waitress who was too kind to walk away. Everyone I trusted wanted me dead, and the one person who saved me is a stranger who had nothing to gain." The room was silent. Outside, the gray Chicago morning pressed against the window. Somewhere below, a bus rumbled past. And in that small, broken apartment, two people who could not have come from more different worlds looked at each other across an impossible distance. Emily Carter had thought when she dragged a dying stranger through the rain that she was simply saving a life. She had thought that when he woke, he would leave, and her part in all of this would be over, and she could go back to her small, hard, ordinary existence. She had no idea that she had just stepped into the center of a war. She had no idea that the man in her bed would soon become the most important person in her life, or that she would become the most important person in his. She had no idea that the choice she had made in 3 terrified seconds behind that restaurant would change absolutely everything for both of them forever. She only knew in that moment that the most dangerous man in Chicago was sitting in her bed looking at her like she was something he had never seen before, and that whatever came next, there was no walking away now. Adrian Blackwell pushed himself up a little straighter, wincing, his eyes locked on hers. "Emily," he said, "I need you to tell me everything you saw, every word they said, every detail you can remember." He paused. "Because those 2 men think I'm dead, and as long as they think that we have exactly one advantage in the entire world." Emily whispered. They saw a Mafia boss die in a parking lot, Adrian said. What they didn't see, what they never could have imagined, was you. His cold eyes held hers, and they are going to regret more than they have ever regretted anything, that they left me in the one place in this city where somebody still had a heart. For the next hour, Emily told him everything. She sat in the wooden chair beside her own bed and repeated every word she could remember, and Adrian Blackwell listened with a focus so complete it was almost frightening. He did not interrupt, he did not react. He simply absorbed his eyes, never leaving her face, and every so often he would ask a single quiet question that cut straight to the heart of something. "The one you didn't name," he said. "What did his hands look like?" Emily blinked. His hands. When men handle a needle, some of them are steady and some of them shake. Which was he? Steady, Emily said, slowly remembering. Both of them, like they'd done it 100 times. Something moved behind Adrian's eyes. "Then it wasn't the first time," he murmured. "They've done this before, to other people. My people." He was quiet for a moment. "How many men have simply disappeared this past year, and I told myself they'd run or gone soft or crossed the wrong rival, and all this time it was happening inside my own house." Emily didn't understand most of what he was talking about, but she understood the tone. It was the tone of a man watching his entire world reveal itself to have been a lie. "You should eat something," she said, because it was the only thing she could think to do. "You lost a lot of whatever they put in you. It took a lot out of you. You need to eat." Adrian looked at her as if she had said something in a foreign language. "You almost died last night," Emily said. "Now you need to eat. That's how it works. I don't have much, but I have eggs and some bread. Sit there." And then something happened that neither of them expected. Adrian Blackwell, a man before whom grown criminals lowered their voices, did as he was told. He watched this small, exhausted waitress get up and move to her tiny kitchen and crack eggs into a pan, and a look of pure, baffled confusion settled over his face. Because in 20 years, no one had ever spoken to him like that. No one had ever told him to sit and eat. People obeyed him, or they feared him, or they schemed against him. Nobody had ever, not once, simply tried to take care of him. He ate the eggs in silence. When he was done, he set the plate aside and said very quietly, "Thank you." Emily, washing the pan, went still. Something in the way he said it told her that it was a word he did not use often and perhaps did not fully know how to use. "You're welcome," she said. That was the moment the front door rattled. Emily's whole body seized. Someone was outside. Someone was working the handle. Her mind flew instantly to Marcus, to the black SUV, to two steady hands that did not shake, and the blood drained from her face. Adrian moved faster than a man in his condition should have been able to. He was off the bed and on his feet, his back against the wall beside the door, and there was suddenly a small, black, terrible-looking pistol in his hand that Emily had not known he was carrying. His eyes found hers, and he raised one finger to his lips. Silence. The handle turned again, and then a young voice muffled through the door called out, "Em, why's the door locked? You never lock it." Noah. Emily nearly collapsed with relief. "It's my brother," she whispered frantically to Adrian. "It's just my brother. Please, please put that away, please." For one long, terrible second, Adrian did not move, and Emily saw in his eyes the calculation of a man weighing every possibility, including the possibility that the boy at the door was not a boy at all, but a trick. Then he looked at her face, at the naked terror in it. Terror not for herself, but for whoever was on the other side of that door, and he lowered the gun. Emily rushed to open it. Noah stood in the hallway, 16 years old, thin as a reed, his backpack over one shoulder, and a confused look on his pale face. He had his sister's same brown eyes and the same stubborn set to his jaw, though on him it looked younger, softer, not yet worn down by the world. "Why are you being weird?" he said. Then he saw past her, saw the man standing against the wall, and his eyes went wide. "Who's that?" "Noah, come in. Come in and close the door." Emily pulled him inside and shut the door and locked it again, her hands trembling. His name is Adrian. He had an accident last night and I helped him. He's just resting here for a little while." Noah looked at Adrian. Adrian looked at Noah. And the boy, with the fearless honesty of the young, said, "You don't look like you had an accident. You look like somebody tried to kill you." The room went very still. Emily's heart stopped. But Adrian, after a long moment, did something Emily had not seen him do yet. The corner of his mouth moved. It was not quite a smile, but it was close. "Smart kid," Adrian said. "He's too smart," Emily said quickly. "Noah, sit down. And you can't tell anyone about this. Not your friends, not anyone. It's really important. It's not a game. Do you understand me?" Something in her voice made the boy stop joking. He looked from his sister's face to the stranger's, and for the first time he seemed to grasp that whatever was happening was real and serious and dangerous. "Okay," he said quietly. "I won't say anything." He looked at Adrian again, and then in a smaller voice, "Are the people who did it going to come here?" And there it was. The exact question Emily had been too afraid to ask out loud. She held her breath. Adrian was quiet for a moment. "No," he said, "because they think I'm dead, and they can't come after a dead man." He looked at Emily. "But that only works as long as it stays that way. The moment anyone learns I'm alive, everything changes." His eyes hardened. "Which is why I have to be careful about my next move. If I surface too soon, if I let Victor know I survived, he'll come with everything he has, and it won't just be me he comes for. It'll be everyone connected to me." He paused, and the weight of it hung in the air, including the people who helped me. Emily understood exactly what he was saying. By saving him, she had tied her fate and her brother's to his. There was no undoing it now. "Then don't let him find out," she said. "I don't intend to," Adrian said. "But I need time, and I need to understand how deep this goes before I do anything." He looked around the small apartment. "And I need somewhere to stay that no one would ever think to look. Somewhere no one connected to my world would ever imagine Adrian Blackwell hiding." His eyes settled on the two of them, the waitress and her sick younger brother in their tiny broken apartment, and the irony of it was not lost on him. "This," he said quietly, "is the safest place in Chicago for me right now, because it's the last place anyone would look." Emily's stomach dropped. "You want to stay here?" "I'm asking," Adrian said, and the word asking clearly cost him something, "for a few days. Until I understand what I'm dealing with, I'll pay you, whatever you need." "I don't want your money," Emily said automatically. "I know," Adrian said, and there was something almost gentle in the way he said it. "That's exactly why I can trust you." He held her gaze. "But I'm going to help you anyway, because that's the kind of debt I don't leave unpaid. Your brother is sick. I saw the bottle on the counter. Heart—" Emily froze. Noah looked at the floor. "He has a congenital heart condition," Emily said quietly. "He needs a surgery, a procedure. It's very expensive and we can't." She stopped. She did not want to say the rest in front of her brother. "We're managing." Adrian looked at the boy for a long moment. "How long?" he asked, not unkindly. "How long what? How long has he needed the surgery?" Emily's throat tightened. 14 months. Adrian nodded slowly and something crossed his face that Emily could not read. He said nothing more about it then, but she would learn in the days that followed that Adrian Blackwell forgot nothing, and that when he said a debt would not go unpaid, he meant it in ways she could not yet imagine. The days that followed were the strangest of Emily's life. She went to work each morning as if nothing had changed, plastering on a smile for customers, carrying plates, counting tips, and the entire time her heart pounded with a secret that could get her killed. And each evening, she came home to find the most feared man in Chicago sitting quietly in her apartment, growing stronger, watching, waiting, thinking. He was not what she had expected. She had expected a monster. And there were moments in the sharp, cold way his eyes moved, in the flat, deadly calm of his voice when he spoke of his enemies, when she saw exactly why the whole city feared him. But there were other moments, too. She came home one night to find him helping Noah with his math homework, explaining a problem with a patience she would not have believed him capable of. She found him another night standing at the window for hours, unmoving, and when she asked what he was thinking about, he said only, everyone I ever trusted, and did not explain further. Slowly in pieces she learned who he was, and slowly in pieces she learned who Victor Hale was. He was there at the beginning, Adrian told her one night when Noah was asleep and the apartment was dark and quiet. Before I had anything, before I was anyone, it was just the two of us, two kids with nothing, and we swore we'd build something no one could ever take from us, and we did. His voice was flat. 20 years. I made him my second. I trusted him with my life. I trusted him with everything. He looked at his own hands. There is no one on this earth I trusted more than Victor Hale, and he is the one who put the needle in my arm. Not himself, of course. He's too careful for that. He sent Marcus. But it was him. It was always going to be him. Why? Emily asked. If you gave him everything, why would he want you dead? Adrian was quiet for a long time. Because I gave it to him, he finally said. And a man who is given power his whole life eventually decides he'd rather take it. So that it's his. So that he doesn't owe it to anyone. He shook his head slowly. I should have seen it. The signs were there. Men disappearing. Money that didn't add up. Decisions being made that I never authorized. I told myself I was imagining it because the alternative meant admitting that the one person I loved like a brother was betraying me. His jaw tightened. I already lost one brother. My real one. Years ago. I couldn't bear to lose another, so I lied to myself, and it nearly got me killed. Emily heard the crack in his voice when he said the word brother, and she understood that she had touched something very deep and very old. She did not push, but she filed it away, the mention of a brother lost years ago, without knowing yet how important it would turn out to be. So what are you going to do? She asked. I can't just walk back in, Adrian said. If I surface with nothing, it's my word against his, and by now he's spent days poisoning everyone against me. He'll have told them I ran, or that I broke. He'll have positioned himself as the natural successor. Half my men will already believe him. If I show up alive without proof, I'm not a returning king. I'm a threat to be finished off quietly. He shook his head. No, I need evidence. I need something that proves what he's done, something no one can argue with. I need to hit him with the truth so hard that his own people turn on him. He looked at her. And that is going to take time and patience, and it is going to be very, very dangerous. Emily wrapped her arms around herself. And where do Noah and I fit in all of this? You don't, Adrian said firmly. That's the point. The less you're involved, the safer you are. As soon as I'm strong enough, I'll move somewhere else. I'll set things up so that if this goes wrong, no one ever connects you to me. You saved my life. I'm not going to repay that by getting you killed. And Emily believed him. That was the strange thing. Everything she had ever heard said this man was a liar and a killer. But when Adrian Blackwell looked her in the eye and told her he would keep her safe, she believed him completely. She should not have believed that it would be so simple, because 3 days later, everything fell apart. It began small, the way disasters often do. Emily arrived at work for the evening shift, and her manager, a nervous man named Doug, who had never once had a problem with her in 2 years, called her into the back and would not meet her eyes. Emily, I'm real sorry, he said, but we're going to have to let you go. The words didn't make sense at first. Let me go, Doug. What are you talking about? I've never missed a shift. I've never been late. What did I do? You didn't do anything. Doug wiped his forehead. He looked genuinely miserable and genuinely afraid, and that fear was what made Emily's stomach turn to ice. It's a business decision. We're cutting staff. I'm sorry. You're not cutting anyone else, Emily said slowly. Just me. Why just me, Doug? Doug swallowed hard. Please, Emily, don't make this harder. Just take your things and go. And look. He lowered his voice, and there was real terror in it now. Whatever you got yourself mixed up in, get out of it. That's all I'm going to say. Get out of it. And Emily understood. Someone had come to Doug. Someone with money and power had told a small nervous man to fire her, and had frightened him so badly that he'd rather lose a good employee than ask a single question. Someone knew about her. She walked out of that restaurant with her heart hammering, and by the time she got home, she was shaking. Adrian took one look at her face and was on his feet. What happened? I got fired, Emily said, for no reason. And Doug, my manager, he told me to get out of whatever I was mixed up in. Adrian, someone told him to fire me. Someone with enough power to scare him half to death. Her voice rose. They know. Somehow they know about me. Adrian went very still, and the temperature in the room seemed to drop. What did the person look like? He asked. The one who came to your manager. I don't know. Doug wouldn't say. Adrian began to move, checking the window, checking the door, his whole body shifting into something coiled and lethal. This isn't Marcus, he said half to himself. Marcus would have just come for you. This is subtler. This is a message. This is someone letting you know that they can reach into your life and pull it apart piece by piece whenever they want. He turned to face her, and his expression was grim. This is Victor. But you said he thinks you're dead. He does, Adrian said, which means he didn't find you looking for me. His eyes narrowed as the logic clicked into place, and what he said next made Emily's blood run cold. He found you because someone saw you that night, in the parking lot, or on the street dragging me, a camera, a window, a witness, something. And Victor, being careful, went looking into every loose end from that night, and he found a waitress who was in the wrong place at the wrong time. Adrian's jaw clenched. He doesn't know you saved me. If he knew that you'd already be dead. But he knows you might have seen something, and he's applying pressure, testing you, squeezing your life to see what falls out. Emily sank into a chair, her legs no longer able to hold her. So what does that mean? What does he want? It means, Adrian said quietly, that I've stayed here too long. I've put you in danger just by being here. I have to go. Tonight. He was already gathering the few things he had. If I'm gone, there's nothing connecting you to me. If Victor's men watch you and find nothing, if you just go on being a fired waitress with a sick brother, they'll lose interest. You're only a threat if there's something to find, so there won't be. You're leaving. And Emily was surprised in that moment by the flicker of something like fear that went through her at the thought. Not fear of Victor, fear of being alone in this again. I have to, Adrian said. It's the only way to protect you. He stopped at the door and looked back at her, and for a moment the cold mask slipped and she saw something raw underneath. Emily, listen to me. Whatever happens now, whatever they do, whatever they offer you, you don't know anything. You never saw anything. You found no one and helped no one. If they push you, you cry, and you tell them you have no idea what they're talking about. Do you understand me? Your life depends on it. Your brother's life depends on it. I understand, Emily whispered. I mean it. Say it back to me. I don't know anything. I never saw anything. Adrian nodded slowly. And then he did something that surprised them both. He crossed the small room and he took her hand briefly and pressed something into it. A folded slip of paper. If you're ever in real danger, he said, if there's no other way, you call that number, anytime, day or night, and you say the name Blackwell, and someone will come. His eyes held hers. I don't leave debts unpaid, Emily Carter. You gave me my life. If yours is ever in danger, that number gives it back. And then he was gone, slipping out into the Chicago night, and Emily stood alone in her apartment holding a slip of paper with a phone number on it, and she felt absurdly like she had lost something she had only just found. For 2 days, nothing happened. Emily looked for new work. She sat with Noah in the evenings and tried to pretend everything was normal. She told herself Adrian had been right, that with him gone, the danger would pass, that she and Noah would simply return to their small, hard, ordinary lives. She was wrong. On the 3rd day, Noah collapsed. It happened in the morning before school. One moment he was standing at the counter, and the next his face had gone gray, and his hand flew to his chest and he crumpled, and Emily's scream tore through the tiny apartment as she caught him before his head hit the floor. The next hours were a blur of terror. The ambulance, the lights, the hospital, the doctors moving fast and speaking in low, urgent voices while Emily stood frozen in the hallway, her whole body one long, silent scream. She had been here before. She knew this feeling. She knew the specific bottomless horror of watching her little brother's life hang by a thread while she stood there helpless, with nothing able to do, nothing but pray. Eventually, a doctor came to her. His face was kind and grave, and Emily knew before he spoke that it was bad. Your brother is stable for now, the doctor said. "But Emily, his condition has deteriorated significantly. The procedure he needs, it's no longer something we can keep putting off. He needs it soon, within weeks, if he doesn't get it." The doctor paused, choosing his words. "His heart is failing. I'm very sorry. I wish I had better news." "How much?" Emily heard herself say. "The procedure. How much does it cost?" The doctor told her. And Emily's world simply ended. The number was so large, it was meaningless. It was a number from another planet, a number that a fired waitress with an empty bank account could no more produce than she could reach up and pull down the moon. She had known all along that the surgery was beyond her, but she had always told herself she'd find a way, that there was time, that somehow, and now there was no more time. Now her brother would die in weeks because his sister was poor. That was the whole truth of it. That was all it came down to. She sat in the hospital hallway that night alone, holding her own hands to keep them from shaking, and she had never in her life felt so completely powerless. And that was when a calm, pleasant voice spoke from beside her. "Miss Carter." Emily looked up. A man had sat down in the chair next to her. He was perhaps 50, well-dressed, distinguished with silver at his temples, and a warm, sympathetic smile. He looked like a doctor or a lawyer or someone's kindly uncle. Everything about him radiated calm reassurance. "I'm sorry to intrude at such a difficult time," the man said gently. "My name is Victor Hale." Every drop of blood in Emily's body turned to ice. She kept her face still. She did not know how she did it, but she did. "Cry," Adrian had said. "Tell them you don't know anything." She stared at this smiling, silver-haired man, this man who had ordered Adrian's murder, this man who had reached into her life and torn it apart, and she forced her face to show only the confusion of a frightened, grieving stranger. "I'm sorry," she said. Do I know you?" "No," Victor said warmly. "But I know a little about you, and I know about your brother. Such a tragedy, so young." He shook his head with what looked exactly like genuine sorrow. "I happen to be in a position to help families in situations like yours. I run a foundation. We provide assistance for medical cases exactly like Noah's." He let that sink in. The full cost of his procedure, the surgery, the recovery, everything he needs. I can make it happen, tomorrow, with a single phone call. Emily's heart was slamming against her ribs. She said nothing. "I can see you're overwhelmed," Victor said kindly. "It's a great deal of money, more than most people see in a lifetime, and I'm offering it freely to save a boy's life." He smiled. "There's really only one small thing I'd need from you in return." And there it was. Emily's mouth had gone completely dry. A few weeks ago, Victor said, his voice still gentle, still warm, his eyes never leaving hers, "You were leaving your job late at night, behind the restaurant on Halsted, and I believe you may have seen something you perhaps didn't understand, some men, a car, perhaps a person who was unwell." He tilted his head. "I'm simply trying to locate a friend of mine, a man who's been missing since that night. I think you might know something that could help me find him. That's all. You tell me what you saw, where he went, anything at all." His smile widened, warm and terrible. "And your brother lives. It's a very simple trade, Miss Carter. His life. For a little information. Anyone in your position would say yes." Emily sat frozen in the hospital chair and understood with perfect and horrible clarity exactly what was being asked of her. Her brother's life was dying in a room down the hall. The money to save him was sitting right beside her, smiling. And all she had to do to get it was tell this man where to find Adrian Blackwell, so that he could finish what he'd started, so that the man who had trusted her, the man who had done her brother's math homework, the man who had pressed a slip of paper into her hand and told her he did not leave debts unpaid, would be hunted down and killed. Victor Hale watched her face with the patient, pleasant expression of a man who has never once in his entire life imagined that anyone would tell him no. "Take your time," he said gently. "Think about what matters most to you." He rose to his feet and buttoned his jacket. "I'll come back tomorrow, and I do hope for your brother's sake that you'll have made the right choice." He walked away down the hall, calm and unhurried, and Emily Carter sat alone in the silence with her brother's life in one hand and another man's death in the other, and no idea on earth how she was going to choose. Emily did not sleep that night. She sat beside Noah's hospital bed, watching the slow rise and fall of his thin chest, listening to the steady beep of the monitor that was the only thing standing between her brother and the dark, and she turned Victor Hale's offer over and over in her mind until she thought she would lose her sanity. It was so simple. That was the cruelty of it. Victor had made it so simple. She had a slip of paper in her pocket. On it was a phone number, but that was not the number Victor wanted. He wanted an address, a location, a direction. He wanted her to hand over the one thing that would let him find Adrian and finish him. And in exchange, the impossible number that stood between Noah and death would simply vanish. Her brother would live. He would have his surgery. He would grow up. He would have the future that every day of her life Emily had bled to give him. All she had to do was become the kind of person who sells a man's life for money. "He's just a criminal," she whispered to herself in the dark, testing the thought the way you test a bad tooth. "He's a mafia boss. He's killed people. He's done terrible things. The world wouldn't even miss him." She pressed her hands to her face. "And he's a stranger. I knew him for 3 days. 3 days. Noah is my brother. Noah is my whole life. What kind of person chooses a stranger over her own brother? What kind of person lets her brother die to protect a killer?" But every time she got to the end of that argument, she ran into the same wall. And the wall was Adrian's face. Not the cold face. Not the face that made criminals lower their voices. The other one. The one that had appeared briefly when he'd said thank you for the eggs and clearly hadn't known how. The one she'd seen when he sat with Noah at the kitchen table patiently working through a math problem and for a few minutes had looked like nothing more dangerous than a tired man being kind to a boy. The one that had cracked open when he said the word brother, and she'd understood that he too had once loved someone the way she loved Noah, and had lost them. He had trusted her. That was the thing she couldn't get past. In a whole life of being betrayed by everyone he'd ever trusted, he had looked at Emily Carter and decided against every instinct he had to believe in her. He had put his life in her hands literally twice. And now she was being asked to be exactly the thing he'd spent 20 years learning everyone was. By morning, she had not decided. She had only exhausted herself. The next day passed in a fog of dread. Emily sat with Noah, and she watched the door, and every time a shadow moved in the hallway, she thought it was Victor coming back for his answer. Noah was awake for part of the day, weak and pale, and he could tell something was wrong with his sister, though he didn't know what. You look terrible," he said, trying to smile. "You should go home and sleep." "I'm fine, buddy." "You're not fine. You've got your worried face on. The one you get about money." He looked at her, too perceptive, always too perceptive. "It's really bad, isn't it? The surgery, we can't pay for it." Emily took his hand. "Don't you worry about that," she said. "That's my job. You just focus on getting stronger." "I'm scared, Noah said quietly. And it broke her heart because Noah almost never admitted to being scared. He'd spent his whole sick life pretending to be brave so his sister wouldn't worry. "I don't want to die." "You're not going to die," Emily said fiercely, and she gripped his hand hard. "Do you hear me? I am not going to let you die. I will find a way, I promise you, I promise." And that was the moment the terrible truth of it settled all the way into her bones, because she had just made her brother a promise. And there was sitting somewhere in this city right now a man in an expensive suit who could make that promise come true with a single phone call. All she had to do was give him what he wanted. That evening, Victor Hale came back. He appeared in the doorway of the small waiting area where Emily had gone to be alone, and he was every bit as calm and pleasant as before, that warm, sympathetic smile fixed on his distinguished face. He sat down across from her and folded his hands. "I hope you've had time to think," he said gently. "How is the boy?" "He's dying," Emily said flatly. "But you know that. That's why you're here." Victor's smile didn't waver. "I'm here because I want to help. I meant what I said, Miss Carter. I can save your brother's life. It's not an empty offer. I can have the arrangements made tonight. The best surgeon in the state, a private room, everything." He leaned forward slightly. "You have no idea how rarely someone in your position is offered a way out. Most people in your situation simply lose the ones they love, and there's nothing they can do about it. You've been given a gift. All I'm asking is that you take it." "By telling you where he is," Emily said. "By telling me what you saw," Victor corrected smoothly. "That's all. A location, a direction. Where the man went that night. Whether anyone helped him. It's such a small thing." His eyes for just a moment lost some of their warmth, and Emily saw the thing underneath cold and patient and utterly without mercy. "And I should mention, Miss Carter, so that you fully understand your situation. I'm offering you the easy path. I'm offering to save your brother and reward you for a simple piece of honesty. But I'm not a man who is accustomed to hearing no. If you were to refuse me, if you were to be difficult, I would be forced to conclude that you're not a frightened bystander at all, but someone who's chosen a side, and I would treat you accordingly." He let that hang in the air. "So, this can be the best day of your life or the worst. That part is entirely up to you." There it was, laid bare at last, not just a bribe, a threat wearing the mask of a gift. Emily looked at him, this smiling, silver-haired man who had ordered a needle put into the arm of the person who trusted him most in the world, and she felt something in her that was not fear. It was older than fear. It was the same thing that had refused to let her walk away in that parking lot. But she was not a fool. She knew what he could do. She knew her brother's life was in his hands. So she did what Adrian had told her to do. She cried. It was not even hard. The tears were real. "I don't understand what you want from me." She wept, and every word was true, even as it was a lie. "I'm just a waitress. My brother is dying. I don't know anything about missing men or that night. I go to work, I come home, I take care of Noah. That's my whole life. I've told you everything I know, which is nothing. Please, I'm begging you. If you really can help my brother, then help him, but I can't tell you something I don't know." Victor watched her cry, and for a long moment his face was unreadable. He was a man who had spent his life reading people, weighing them, deciding what they were, and Emily wept and prayed that whatever he saw in her, he would believe it. Finally he stood. "You're a very good actress, Miss Carter," he said quietly. "Or you're telling the truth. I confess I can't quite tell which, and that troubles me." He buttoned his jacket. "I'll give you a little more time. Not because I'm kind, but because your brother's condition works in my favor. Every day he gets sicker, my offer becomes worth more to you. And eventually, when he's close enough to the edge, you'll tell me anything I want to hear to save him." He smiled that terrible smile. People always do in the end. Love makes everyone honest eventually. And he left. And Emily sat there trembling and understood that she had bought herself only a little time, and that the price of that time was measured in her brother's failing heartbeats. That night, alone in the hospital hallway, she pulled the folded slip of paper out of her pocket and stared at it for a long, long time. Adrian had said to call it only in real danger. Well, what was this if not real danger? Victor was circling. Noah was dying. She was cornered. She could call the number, say the name Blackwell, and someone would come. Adrian would come. He would protect her. But she didn't call it, because she understood sitting there exactly what calling it would mean. If she called that number, she would be pulling Adrian back toward Victor. She would be using the debt he owed her, and the debt would drag him out of hiding, and he would come to protect her, and he would be exposed, and Victor would find him. Calling that number to save herself might get Adrian killed just as surely as telling Victor where he was. And Emily Carter would not do that either. She put the slip of paper back in her pocket. She would not sell him for money, and she would not sacrifice him for her own safety. She would find another way. She didn't know what, but she would find one. For 2 more days, Emily lived in that impossible place. She watched her brother grow weaker. She dodged Victor, who came once more with his patient smile and his gentle threats. She lied. She wept on cue. She held the line. And then on the second night, when she came home to her empty apartment to grab a few hours of sleep and a change of clothes, she found Adrian Blackwell sitting in her kitchen in the dark. She nearly screamed. Then relief flooded through her so hard her knees went weak, followed immediately by fury. "What are you doing here?" she hissed. "You said it wasn't safe. You said staying away was the only way to protect me. What are you doing?" "I've been watching," Adrian said quietly. He did not turn on the light. "I never went far. I couldn't. I told myself I'd stay away, but I've had eyes on you since I left." He looked at her, and even in the dark she could see something raw in his face. "I saw Victor go into the hospital 3 times. I saw him sit down next to you." His voice was very controlled, which she was learning was the most dangerous version of his voice. "Tell me what he said to you, Emily, word for word." So she told him. She told him all of it. The foundation, the surgery, the offer, the threat. And she watched Adrian's face change as she spoke, watched the cold in it deepen with every word, until by the end, it was something that frightened her. "He offered you your brother's life," Adrian said very softly, "in exchange for mine." "Yes." "And you didn't take it." Emily was quiet for a moment. "No." Adrian leaned forward and his eyes bored into her in the dark. "Why not?" And it was not a challenge. It was something more desperate than that. It was the question of a man who had been betrayed by everyone he'd ever trusted, and who needed suddenly and completely to understand why this one person had not betrayed him too. "Your brother is dying, Emily. Dying. And that man offered to save him. All you had to do was tell him where I was. I'm a criminal, a stranger. You've known me for less than 2 weeks. There is no version of this where anyone would blame you. There is no version of this where any sane person would choose me over their own dying brother." His voice cracked just slightly. "So why? Why didn't you take it?" And Emily looked at him, this powerful, feared, broken man, asking her the most vulnerable question a person can ask, and she told him the truth. "Because I made him a promise," she said. "Not Noah. You." She swallowed. "When you were dying in that parking lot, and I decided not to walk away, I made a kind of promise, that I wouldn't be the person who leaves someone to die to save my own skin. And then you trusted me. You who trust nobody, you looked at me, and you decided to believe in me. And if I'd sold you to Victor, I'd have proven that you were wrong too. I'd have proven that the whole world really is what you think it is, that everyone really does have a price, that kindness really is just a trade that hasn't been paid yet." Tears were running down her face now, and she didn't stop them. "And I couldn't do that. Not to you, not to me. I might be poor Adrian. I might have nothing. My brother might die because of it, and I'll have to live with that for the rest of my life. But I am not going to become a person who sells another human being's life for money. I'm just not. Because if I do that, then I've got nothing left at all." The apartment was completely silent. Adrian Blackwell sat in the dark and stared at this woman, this waitress, this nobody who had just chosen to let her own brother die rather than betray a man she barely knew. And something happened in his face that Emily had never seen before on him, or perhaps on anyone. The cold shattered, just fell away completely. And what was underneath was so naked, so undefended, so full of something that had been buried for 20 years that she almost had to look away. "In my entire life," Adrian said, and his voice was not steady anymore, "no one has ever chosen me. Not like that. Not when it cost them everything." He looked down at his own hands. "I've had men swear loyalty to me and sell me out the same week. I had a friend I loved like a brother put a needle in my arm. I built my whole world on the belief that everyone breaks eventually, that everyone has a price." He looked back up at her. "And you just proved me wrong. A waitress with nothing proved me wrong. You had the highest price anyone could ever be offered, your own brother's life, and you didn't break." "I'm sorry," Emily whispered. "I know it doesn't make sense. I know it's not smart. I know I might be letting Noah die for a principle, and that's insane. I know it is." "No," Adrian said. And he stood up, and he crossed the small kitchen, and he stood in front of her. "It's not insane. It's the only thing in my entire life that has ever made complete sense." His jaw was tight, and there was a fierceness in his voice now that was different from anything before, not cold, but blazing. "Listen to me. Your brother is not going to die. Do you hear me? He is going to have his surgery, the best one that exists, and it is not going to cost you anything, and it is not going to cost you your soul, and it has nothing to do with Victor Hale." "Adrian, I can't afford. There's no way I can ever. I don't want you to think I did this to get you to. I didn't refuse Victor so that you'd That's not why. I know that, Adrian said, and there was something almost gentle in it now. That's exactly the point. That's exactly why. You didn't do it for a reward. You did it because it was right. And that is precisely why I am going to make sure your brother lives. Not because you earned it, not because you traded for it, but because you're the first person in 20 years who reminded me that a debt of kindness is the only kind of debt worth honoring. He held her gaze. I told you I don't leave debts unpaid. You gave me my life. Now I'm going to give your brother his, and I'm not asking you to give me anything for it. Not information, not loyalty, not a single thing. It's simply what's right. Emily stared at him, and hope, terrible and enormous and almost unbearable, began to rise in her chest. You can do that. I can do that, Adrian said. The money is nothing to me, Emily. Nothing. I've spent more than that on things that don't matter at all. The only thing that ever cost me anything real was trust. And you just gave me back something I thought was dead. He almost smiled. Consider your brother's life a very small down payment on a debt I'm never going to be able to fully repay. And Emily Carter, who had been carrying the entire weight of the world on her thin shoulders for so long that she'd forgotten what it felt like to set it down, put her face in her hands and wept. Not from grief this time. From relief so total, it felt like drowning. Adrian let her cry. And when she finally lifted her head, wiping her face, he was watching her with an expression that had settled into something new and resolved. But I need you to understand something, he said. The moment I move to save your brother, I expose myself. Money leaves a trail. Victor is watching everything connected to you. The instant a stranger pays for Noah's surgery, he'll know something's happening. He'll start pulling threads, and eventually, those threads lead to me. His eyes were steady. So the moment I do this, the clock starts. He'll know I'm alive. Maybe not right away, but soon. And once he knows this stops being a game of hiding, it becomes a war. Then don't, Emily said, alarmed. Adrian, don't risk yourself. We'll find another way for Noah. I can't let you get killed to save him. There is no other way for Noah, and you know it, Adrian said quietly. And you've had your chance to protect yourself at my expense. Twice. Victor offered it to you. You had that phone number in your pocket. And both times you chose to protect me instead. He shook his head slowly, as if he still couldn't quite believe it. So now it's my turn. You protected me when it cost you everything. I'm going to protect your brother even though it costs me my only advantage. That's how this works. That's what it means when two people actually trust each other. Something you and I are apparently both learning at the same time. Emily looked at him. So what happens now? Adrian's expression hardened into something focused and lethal. Now, he said, I stop hiding. I've spent 2 weeks recovering, learning how deep the rot goes. And it goes deep, Emily. Victor's been building this for years. He's turned half my organization. He's hidden his crimes behind fake companies and clean paperwork. If I come at him with muscle, I lose because he owns most of the muscle now. The only way to destroy Victor Hale is to expose him, to find the proof of everything he's done and put it in front of the people he needs and let them turn on him. His eyes narrowed. And I've spent years running an empire on instinct and force, but Victor's crimes aren't hidden in back alleys. They're hidden in numbers, in accounts, in financial records I can barely read. He looked at her, and something clicked into place in his expression. I need someone who understands money, real money, hidden money, the kind you bury before Noah got sick, before everything fell apart. A life she'd walked away from and tried not to think about, because thinking about it hurt too much. Adrian, she said slowly, there's something you should know about me. He waited. Before I was a waitress, Emily said. Before Noah got sick and I had to drop everything to take care of him, I was studying accounting, finance. I was good at it too, really good. I had plans. Her voice caught. I gave it all up. I had to. But the numbers, the way money hides, the way you follow it, the way you find what someone's trying to bury. She looked up at him. I never forgot how to do that. You don't forget something like that. Adrian Blackwell stared at her, and then slowly, something like awe spread across his face. You, he said quietly, The one person in this city who saved my life, who refused to sell me for her own brother's life, is also the one person who can read the exact records I need to destroy the man who tried to kill me." "I guess so," Emily whispered. "That's not luck," Adrian said. "That can't be luck." He shook his head slowly. "I don't know what to call it, but I know this. Victor thinks the only witness from that night is a helpless waitress he can frighten into silence or buy with a dying brother." His eyes glittered in the dark. He has no idea that the woman he's been threatening is the one person on earth who can take everything he's built and burn it to the ground. He held out his hand to her. "The question is, are you willing to do it? Because the second you say yes, Emily, there's no going back. You stop being someone Victor is watching, and you become someone he's hunting. It's the most dangerous thing you could possibly do." He paused. "But it might be the only way to make sure that neither of us, and neither Noah, ever has to be afraid of that man again." Emily looked at his outstretched hand. She thought about Noah dying in a hospital bed. She thought about Victor Hale's terrible patient smile. She thought about the promise she'd made in a parking lot to a dying stranger, and about the man who had, against every instinct in his hardened heart, decided to trust her. And Emily Carter, Waitress' sister, nobody reached out and took his hand. "Tell me where to start," she said. Adrian kept his word before he asked Emily for a single thing in return. That was the first proof, and it landed harder than any speech could have. 2 days after Emily took his hand in the dark kitchen, a man in an expensive coat walked into the hospital and quietly settled Noah's account in full. Not the outstanding balance. Everything. The surgery, the specialist flown in from out of state, the private room, the months of recovery care that would follow. Emily was standing in the hallway when the head of the cardiac unit came to find her looking bewildered and told her that her brother's procedure had been fully funded by a private benefactor who wished to remain anonymous, and that they had scheduled the operation for the end of the week. Emily had to lean against the wall to keep from falling. "There must be a mistake," she said. I can't afford. Who did this?" "I'm not permitted to say," the doctor told her gently. "But Miss Carter, it's real. It's all been verified. Your brother is going to get his surgery, and from what I'm looking at here, he's going to be all right. He's going to be all right." 4 words Emily had stopped letting herself believe she would ever hear. She went into Noah's room, and she sat on the edge of his bed, and she held her little brother, and she cried into his hair, and Noah, who didn't fully understand what was happening, patted her back and said, Hey, it's okay, Em. Don't cry. Why are you crying if it's good news?" "Because it's good news," Emily said, laughing and sobbing at the same time. "Because it's the best news. Because you're going to be okay." And she knew who to thank. And she knew what it had cost him, because the very same act that saved her brother's life had lit a fuse. Somewhere in the city, money had moved, a trail had appeared, and Victor Hale, who watched everything, was going to notice. When Emily got home that night, Adrian was waiting. She didn't even try to speak. She just crossed the room and threw her arms around him, and for a moment, the most feared man in Chicago went completely rigid, clearly having no idea what to do with being embraced. Then slowly, awkwardly, one of his hands came up and rested against her back. "Thank you," Emily whispered. "Thank you. I don't have words. You saved his life. You actually saved his life." "You saved mine first," Adrian said quietly. "I'm just settling accounts." But there was something in his voice that said it was more than accounts, and they both knew it. She stepped back and wiped her eyes. "You said Victor would find out, that the money would leave a trail." "He will. It might take him a week, maybe 2. My people covered it as carefully as they could, but Victor's not stupid. Eventually he'll trace it." Adrian's expression sharpened. "Which is why we don't have time to waste. The clock is running now, Emily. From this moment on, we're racing him. We have to find the proof of what he's done and get it in front of the right people before he realizes I'm alive and comes for both of us." He looked at her. "Are you ready to work?" "Tell me everything," Emily said. And so they began. Over the next several days, in the dark of her small apartment with the blinds drawn, Adrian laid out for Emily everything he knew about Victor Hale's operation, and Emily began to do the things she had been born to do and had given up doing years ago. It came back to her fast, faster than she expected. Adrian would describe a transaction, a company, a payment he'd never authorized, and Emily's mind would immediately start tracing the shape of it, the way a musician's fingers find the notes, even after years away from the instrument. She saw patterns Adrian couldn't see. She'd spread papers across the kitchen table, documents Adrian's few remaining loyal men had risked their lives to smuggle out, and she'd follow the numbers the way a hunter follows tracks in snow. "This company here," she said one night, tapping a page, "Meridian Holdings. It's fake." Adrian leaned over. "How do you know?" "Because real companies breathe. They have messy books, payroll that changes expenses that spike and dip human error everywhere. This one's too clean. Every number's too round. Money comes in, money goes out, and it always balances perfectly." She looked up at him. "That's not a business. That's a laundry. Somebody's washing money through it. And look here and here. Meridian pays 3 other companies, and those 3 companies pay 2 more. It's a web. He's moving money in circles so that by the time it comes out, the other end nobody can tell where it started." Adrian stared at her, and there was that look again, the one that was becoming familiar. The look of a man watching someone do something he thought was impossible. "I ran this organization for 20 years, he said slowly, "and I never once understood how the money actually moved. I trusted Victor to handle it, and he used that. He hid everything in the one place he knew I'd never look because he knew I couldn't read it." He shook his head. "He built his whole betrayal in the language I couldn't speak." "Well," Emily said grimly, going back to the papers, "I speak it fluently." But it wasn't enough. That was the frustrating truth they kept running into. Emily could see the shape of Victor's crimes, could trace the web, could prove that money was being hidden and moved. But suspicion wasn't proof. To turn Adrian's organization against Victor, to destroy him completely, they needed the source. The original records. The place where the lie began before it got laundered clean. "There has to be a master ledger somewhere," Emily said one night, exhausted, rubbing her eyes. "Somebody like Victor, this careful, this organized, he doesn't keep it all in his head. He'd have records, the real ones, the ones that show what actually happened before it got cleaned up, because he'd need them, to keep track of his own lies, to make sure his people got paid, to have leverage over everyone he's turned." She looked at Adrian. If we find the real records, then we don't just have suspicion. We have everything. Who he paid, what he did, every crime, every betrayal, all of it in one place." Adrian was quiet for a moment. Then something shifted in his face. "There's a place," he said slowly. "An old financial warehouse, outside the city. It used to be where we kept records back in the early days before everything went digital. I hadn't thought about it in years. I assumed it was empty, abandoned." His eyes narrowed. But Victor knew about it. He was there in those days too, and it's exactly the kind of place he'd use. Off the books, forgotten, somewhere nobody would ever think to look because everyone assumes there's nothing there. "Then that's where it is," Emily said. "That's where the real records are." "Maybe. It's the best lead we have. It's the only lead we have." She held his gaze. "We have to go there." Adrian looked at her for a long moment, and she watched the war play out on his face, the desire to keep her safe, fighting against the cold logic that told him she was the only one who could read what they found. "If we go," he said finally, "you understand what it means. That place is outside the city. It's isolated. If Victor's watching it, if there are men there, we'd be walking into it with no backup. I have almost no one left I can trust. It would be just us." He shook his head. "It's the most dangerous thing we could do, and I need you specifically because I can find the records, but I can't read them. If I go alone and grab a box of papers, I won't even know if I have the right ones. It has to be you, and I hate that it has to be you." "Adrian," Emily said quietly, "my brother is alive because you were willing to expose yourself to save him. You risked everything for me. I'm not going to sit safe in this apartment while you walk into that place alone." She lifted her chin. "We started this together. We finish it together. Tell me when we go." And there it was again, that expression on his face. This time she recognized it fully. It was not awe exactly. It was something warmer and more dangerous than awe. It was a man learning very late in life what it felt like to have someone stand beside him, not out of fear or profit, but out of simple, stubborn loyalty. "Tomorrow night," Adrian said. "Noah's surgery is the day after. He'll be in the hospital safe, surrounded by people. That's the window. We go tomorrow night, we get what we need, and we're back before he wakes up." He paused. "And then we end this." The next night they went. The warehouse sat on the outer edge of the county, a hulking old building that looked exactly as forgotten as Adrian had described. They approached it carefully in the dark, and Adrian moved with a coiled watchfulness that reminded Emily sharply of who he really was. This was not the tired man who ate eggs in her kitchen or helped her brother with math. This was Adrian Blackwell, and every line of him was lethal. They got inside through a side entrance Adrian remembered from decades ago, and the moment they were in Emily's heart began to race, because Adrian had been right. The place was not abandoned. There was a section of it deep in the back that had been maintained, locked, secured, and when Adrian broke through the final door, they found it, a room full of records. "This is it," Emily breathed, moving to the shelves, her hands already reaching. "This is it, Adrian. Look at all of this. Can you find what we need? Give me time!" She was already pulling down boxes, opening ledgers, her trained eyes flying across the pages, and what she found made her stomach turn. Because it was all here, everything. The real records kept in Victor's own careful hand, a complete and damning account of everything he'd done. "Adrian," she said, her voice shaking, "it's worse than we thought. Look, he's been skimming from the organization for years, millions. He's got payments here to men who work for you, bribes he's been buying loyalty right out from under you. And here these are payments to police, to officials. He's got people everywhere." She looked up pale. "And this? Look at these dates. He's been planning to kill you for at least 3 years. It's all documented, every step of it. He kept records of his own conspiracy." Adrian came to stand beside her, staring at the pages he couldn't fully read, but understood well enough. His face had gone very still. 3 years, he said quietly. 3 years he sat across from me and smiled and planned this. "There's more," Emily said, flipping faster now, following the thread deeper into the records. "There are older files here from years back." She frowned, pulling out a bound folder, and began to read, and as she read, her face changed. "Adrian," her voice dropped. "Adrian, I think you need to see this." "What is it?" Emily's hands were trembling now. "You told me once you had a brother, a real one, that you lost him years ago." She looked up at him, and her eyes were full of something between horror and heartbreak. "You said it was a betrayal, that someone betrayed you and it got him killed." Adrian went completely rigid. "Yes. You never told me the details, but it's here, it's all here." Emily swallowed hard. "Adrian, the men who killed your brother, the information that got him killed, the betrayal that set it all up." She could barely say it. "It was Victor. Victor sold him out. Your brother died because Victor gave him to your enemies, all those years ago. It was Victor. And you never knew. You mourned your brother, and you leaned on Victor to get through it, and the whole time the person who caused it was standing right next to you, pretending to grieve with you." The silence in that warehouse was absolute. Emily watched Adrian Blackwell receive the single worst piece of information of his life. She watched the man who never showed anything simply stop. His face didn't crumple. He didn't shout. He went somewhere very far away into a place of pain so old and so deep that it had shaped his entire existence, and he stood there staring at nothing as 20 years of his life rearranged themselves into a new and unbearable truth. "The betrayal I carried my whole life," Adrian said, and his voice was barely a whisper. "The wound that made me who I am, that made me cold, that made me trust no one, the thing that broke something in me that never healed." He turned to look at her. "It was him, the one person I let close after that, the one person I told myself I could trust. He's the one who caused it. He caused the wound, and then he became the only thing I leaned on to survive it." A terrible, hollow laugh escaped him. "He's been feeding on me for 20 years, Emily. He killed my brother, comforted me, over the grave made himself indispensable, and then spent 2 decades planning to take everything and finish me too. My whole life has been a lie he authored." Emily set down the folder and did the only thing she could think to do. She reached out and took his hand. "I'm so sorry," she said softly. "I'm so sorry, Adrian." And Adrian Blackwell, standing in a warehouse full of the evidence of his own betrayal, looked down at the small hand holding his, the hand of the one person in his entire life who had never wanted anything from him. And for a moment, Emily thought she saw the sheen of tears in the eyes of a man she'd been told was incapable of feeling anything at all. "You," he said, his voice rough, "in a whole world of people who lied to me, there's you. Do you understand how impossible you are?" "We're going to make him pay," Emily said fiercely. "We have everything now, every crime, your brother, all of it. We're going to destroy him, Adrian, together." Adrian nodded slowly, and something hardened in his face, grief crystallizing into resolve. "Yes," he said, "we are. Gather it all, everything you can carry, the ledgers, the records about the payments, the men he's bought, and the file about my brother. All of it. We take it and we walk out of here and we end him." Emily began to move fast, stuffing the crucial records into a bag, her mind cataloging as she went, keeping the most damning documents together. Her heart was pounding, but underneath the fear was something like triumph. They had it. They actually had it. Everything they needed to burn Victor Hale to the ground. And that was the exact moment they heard the sound. Footsteps, many of them, echoing through the warehouse. Adrian's hand shot out and gripped Emily's arm, and she froze. His head turned toward the sound, and every muscle in his body went taut. "Adrian," she whispered, "what is that?" He didn't answer right away. He was listening, counting, calculating. Then he pulled her back into the shadows of the shelves, his gun already in his hand. "Men," he breathed. 6, maybe 8, coming in from the front. His jaw clenched. They knew. Somehow they knew we were coming here. Emily's blood turned to ice. "Victor! It has to be!" Adrian's mind was racing, and Emily could see the terrible truth arriving on his face. The money. Noah's surgery. He traced it faster than I thought. He figured out I'm alive, and once he knew I was alive, he knew I'd come for the records. This is the one place they'd be. He cursed under his breath. "He's not just watching this place. He's been waiting for me to come to it. It's a trap." And we walked right into it. A voice called out across the warehouse, then echoing off the walls, calm and pleasant, and utterly familiar. Emily's stomach dropped because she knew that voice. She'd heard it in a hospital hallway offering her brother's life for a betrayal. "Adrian," Victor Hale called out warmly, "I have to admit, when they told me the money for a certain sick boy's surgery came from one of your old accounts, I almost didn't believe it. I watched you die. Marcus put enough in your arm to stop 3 hearts." A pause. "But here you are, alive, and here I am so relieved to see you." His voice sharpened, and the warmth curdled into something cold. "And you brought the waitress, the one who's been lying to my face this whole time, the little bystander who saw nothing." A dark chuckle. "You should have taken my offer, Miss Carter. Your brother's alive now, yes, but you've traded a clean life for a very short one." Emily pressed back against the shelves, her heart slamming so hard she thought Victor might hear it. She looked at Adrian, and his face was a mask of cold fury and rapid calculation. "Come out, both of you," Victor called. "There's no other way out of that section. I know this building too, Adrian. I know it better than you do now. You're trapped. So let's not make this ugly. Bring me the records and I'll make it quick. For both of you." A pause. "Make me come in there and it won't be quick at all." Adrian's grip tightened on his gun. He pulled Emily close, his mouth right at her ear, his voice barely a breath. "Listen to me. Whatever happens, you protect that bag. Those records are the only thing that can end him. If we don't walk out of here, someone has to." He pressed something into her free hand. It was the slip of paper again, the phone number. "If it comes to it, you run, you hide, and you call that number and you give the records to the man who answers. His name is Ray. He's the only one left I trust completely. Do you understand?" "Adrian, no," Emily whispered, terror flooding her. "Don't talk like that. Don't you dare talk like that." "Emily." He looked at her, and in the dark, his eyes were fierce and clear. You saved my life for no reason at all except that you have a good heart. You refused to sell me even when it might have cost you your brother. You are the best person I have ever known, and I am not going to let Victor Hale take you the way he took everything else. His jaw set. So do exactly what I say, and trust me. Can you do that? After everything, can you trust me now? Emily looked at the man she had dragged out of the rain, the man who had saved her brother, the man who trusted no one and had somehow come to trust her, and she nodded. I trust you, she whispered. Good, Adrian said, and a cold, terrible calm settled over him. The calm of the man the whole city feared the man Emily had almost forgotten was underneath. He raised his voice, and it rang out across the warehouse, steady and unafraid. Victor, Adrian called, you made one mistake. A pause. And what's that, old friend? You should have made sure I was dead, Adrian said, because now I know everything. I know about the money, I know about the men you bought, and I know what you did to my brother 20 years ago. His voice dropped, and it carried a promise of violence that made even Emily shiver. You took him from me, and you comforted me over his grave, and you're going to answer for that tonight, one way or another. The silence that followed was different. Emily heard it. For the first time, Victor Hale did not have a smooth, pleasant reply. For just a moment, the man who controlled everything had been knocked off balance by the knowledge that his oldest and deepest secret had been dragged into the light. And in that moment of silence, Adrian moved, pulling Emily deeper into the maze of shelves as the first gunshots exploded through the warehouse and the trap became a battle, with the two of them caught in the middle of it, holding the only evidence in the world that could destroy Victor Hale and no certain way out alive. The gunfire tore through the warehouse, and Adrian pulled Emily down behind a heavy steel shelf, his body between her and the sound. Stay low, he said into her ear. Stay behind me. Do not stand up no matter what you hear. Emily clutched the bag of records to her chest so hard her arms ached. Her whole body was shaking, but her grip on that bag never loosened because Adrian had told her it was the only thing that could end Victor, and she would rather die than let it go. There are too many of them, she whispered. Adrian, there are too many. I know. His eyes were moving constantly, tracking sounds, counting positions. Which means we don't win this by fighting. We win it by getting you out with those records. Everything else is secondary. Even me. No, Emily said fiercely. Not even you. I didn't drag you out of the rain to watch you die in a warehouse. Whatever your plan is, it has both of us in it, or I'm not doing it. For half a second in the middle of all that chaos, Adrian looked at her and something crossed his face that was almost tenderness. You are the most stubborn person I've ever met, he said. You have no idea, Emily said. A voice called out over the sound of settling silence. Victor. Adrian, this is pointless. My men have every exit. You're bleeding manpower you don't have. Give me the records, hand over the girl, and I'll let you die like a man instead of an animal. It's the last mercy I can offer an old friend. Adrian didn't answer. Instead, he did something Emily didn't expect. He reached into his coat and pulled out a phone, and his fingers moved fast across it. What are you doing? Emily hissed. Insurance, Adrian murmured. You keep records to have leverage. Victor taught me that himself. His eyes flicked to her. 2 nights ago, while you were reading the ledgers, I photographed everything you flagged, the most important pages. And I sent them to Ray. He's had them since last night. A grim smile touched his mouth. So even now, even trapped in here, Victor's already lost. He just doesn't know it yet. The evidence is already out. The only thing left to decide is whether we walk out too. Emily stared at him. You had it out the whole time. Why didn't you tell me? Because if this went wrong, I needed you to still believe getting those physical records out mattered. I needed you fighting to survive, not giving up because the job was already done. He looked at her steadily. But it's not the job I care about anymore, Emily. Do you understand me? 2 weeks ago, I would have traded any life in this building for that evidence. Tonight, all I want is to get you home to your brother. He gripped her shoulder. So here's what happens. There's a loading door on the east side. Old, half-rusted. My men used it decades ago. Victor probably doesn't remember it exists. I'm going to draw them toward the front, and you're going to run for that door, and you are not going to look back, and you are not going to come back for me. Understand? Adrian, I can't leave you. You can, and you will, because if you don't, everything you sacrificed means nothing." His voice was hard now. "You chose not to sell me. You chose to let Noah stay in danger rather than betray me. Don't make all of that worthless by dying next to me for no reason. Live. That's how you honor it. You live." Emily's eyes filled with tears, and she opened her mouth to argue, but that was the moment 2 of Victor's men came around the end of the shelf, guns raised, and Adrian moved. He moved so fast, Emily could barely follow it. He was up and firing before the men had even fully registered where he was, and in the space of 2 seconds it was over, and the 2 men were down, and Adrian was already pulling Emily to her feet. "Now," he said, "East door, go." But Emily hesitated 1 second too long, because she saw what Adrian could not, a 3rd man rising up behind him, weapon coming level. She didn't think. She screamed his name and shoved him sideways, and the shot that would have gone through his back went wide, and Adrian spun and returned fire, and the man fell. Adrian stared at her, breathing hard. "You just saved my life," he said. "Again." "That's 3 times now," Emily said, half hysterical. "You're keeping terrible track." Something broke open in Adrian's face, something between disbelief and a fierce blazing warmth, and for 1 impossible second in the middle of a gun battle, he almost laughed. "Get to the door," he said. "I'm right behind you. This time I promise, both of us, together like you said." And Emily believed him, and she ran. She ran through the maze of shelves, clutching the bag, her heart-hammering gunfire erupting behind her as Adrian drew the men toward the front of the warehouse. She reached the east side. She found the door old and rusted, exactly as he'd described. She threw her weight against it, and it groaned and gave opening onto the cold night, onto freedom, onto the chance to live, and she stopped, because she could not do it. She could not run through that door and leave him. Every instinct that had refused to let her walk away in that parking lot refused to let her walk away now. She turned back toward the sound of the gunfire, toward the man who had saved her brother and trusted her when he trusted no one, and she made her choice. But before she could take a single step back into that warehouse, everything changed. The front doors of his warehouse burst open, and light flooded in, and a voice amplified thunderous filled the entire building. "Federal agents, everybody down! Drop your weapons! Get on the ground now!" Emily froze. The gunfire stuttered and died, and into the warehouse poured a flood of armed agents in tactical gear weapons, up moving fast and hard, and Victor Hale's men, outnumbered and outgunned, began throwing down their guns and dropping to their knees. Emily stood at the east door, stunned, uncomprehending. And then she understood. Ray, the evidence. Adrian had sent the records to Ray the night before, and Ray had done something with them, had gotten them to the right people, and those people had come. Not for Adrian, for Victor, for the mountain of crimes documented in his own hand. She found Adrian across the warehouse, standing very still amid the chaos, his gun already lowered and set on the ground at his feet, his hands visible and open. He was looking at her, and even from across that whole distance she could read what was in his face. It was relief, not for himself, for her. The next minutes were a blur of shouting and movement. Emily was pulled aside by agents, the bag taken gently from her hands, questions coming fast. But she barely heard them because she was watching Adrian watching them approach him, and she was terrified of what came next. Because Adrian Blackwell was not an innocent man. He was the most feared criminal in Chicago. The same raid that ended Victor could just as easily end him. But something strange happened. The agents did not tackle him or drag him away. An older agent, gray-haired and sharp-eyed, walked up to Adrian and stood in front of him, and the two men looked at each other with the wary recognition of people who had known each other for a very long time from opposite sides of a line. Emily could not hear what they said, but she saw Adrian talk, saw him gesture toward the records, saw the older agent listen. And later, much later, she would learn the truth of it. That Adrian, in the days he'd spent recovering and planning, had made a calculation. That he had known Victor's evidence would burn Victor to the ground, but that it would also expose the entire organization, including Adrian himself. and that Adrian had made a choice quietly, without telling Emily, because he hadn't wanted her to carry the weight of it. He had decided to give it all up. He had reached out to the one man in federal law enforcement he'd crossed paths with for 2 decades, and he had offered a trade. Everything he knew, every record. The complete destruction of Victor Hale and his network, and the dismantling of the criminal empire Adrian himself had built in exchange for one thing: immunity for the waitress and her brother, complete and total. Their names kept out of everything, their lives left untouched. He had traded his empire for their safety, and he had done it before they ever walked into that warehouse. But Emily didn't know all of that yet. What she knew in that moment was that Victor Hale was being led out of the warehouse in handcuffs, and that as he passed her, his pleasant mask finally completely gone, he stopped and looked at her with pure venom. "A waitress!" he said, his voice shaking with disbelief and rage. 20 years I built this. 20 years I planned, and it all comes apart because of a waitress who wouldn't take a bribe. He laughed an ugly, broken sound. "You should have taken the money, girl. You could have had an easy life." Emily looked at the man who had offered her brother's life in exchange for a betrayal, the man who had killed Adrian's brother and comforted him over the grave, the man who had smiled while he planned murder, and she felt no fear of him anymore. He was finished. He was small. "I already have everything I need," she said quietly. And it turns out it was never for sale. Victor stared at her, and whatever he saw in her face seemed to break something in him, and then the agents pulled him away out of the warehouse, out of their lives, into the ruin he had built for himself. And Emily would learn in the weeks that followed that the confrontation didn't end there, that Adrian, before he gave everything up, insisted on one thing: that he be allowed to face Victor directly in front of the remnants of the world they'd both built, so that everyone would know the truth. And he got it. In a room full of the city's most powerful criminal figures, the people Victor had spent years buying and turning, Adrian laid it all out. The stolen money, the purchased loyalty, and the oldest crime of all, the betrayal that had killed Adrian's brother 20 years before. Victor tried to fight it. He tried his old trick, claiming Adrian had lost his mind, that the poison had broken him, that he was unstable and unfit and lying. But Emily's evidence was undeniable. The records were in Victor's own hand. Every lie collapsed. Every ally turned away from him. In a single night, the empire Victor Hale had spent 2 decades stealing simply disintegrated around him, and the men who had feared and followed him watched him fall with the cold indifference he had taught them. Victor Hale's greatest weapon had always been the belief that everyone could be bought, and in the end, he was destroyed by the one person who proved that wasn't true. But Adrian's true victory, Emily came to understand, was not the destruction of his enemy, it was what came after. The night the raid ended, once the questions were answered and the records were secured, and Emily was finally allowed to leave, she found Adrian outside the warehouse, standing alone in the cold, watching the flashing lights. He was no longer the most feared man in Chicago. In the space of one night, he had ceased to be a Mafia boss at all. He had given it all away, and he looked standing there not diminished, but somehow lighter, like a man who had set down a weight he'd carried so long he'd forgotten it wasn't part of him. "You gave everything up," Emily said, coming to stand beside him. She'd pieced enough of it together by then to understand. "The whole thing, your entire empire, you traded it away." "Yes," Adrian said. "Why?" He was quiet for a long moment. "Because it was built on a lie," he finally said. 20 years I told myself I built something real, something that mattered. And then I found out the whole foundation of it was Victor, and Victor was rot all the way down. He killed my brother to start it, and he was going to kill me to finish it. He shook his head slowly. "The empire was never mine, Emily. It was a cage Victor built around me the day he betrayed my brother. Giving it up wasn't losing anything. It was walking out of a prison I'd been living in for 20 years without knowing it." Emily looked at him. "And the immunity, for me and Noah. You traded your empire for that. You did it before we even went into the warehouse, didn't you?" Adrian looked at her, and there was no point denying it. "Yes." "You could have kept some of it," Emily said. "You could have negotiated for yourself, kept money, power protection something. Instead, you spent all of it on making sure a waitress and her little brother could just walk away clean." I spent it on the two people who mattered, Adrian said simply. There was nothing else worth spending it on. Emily's throat tightened. Adrian, what happens to you now? You gave everything away. Your money, your power, all of it. What's left for you? And Adrian Blackwell, the man who had once controlled a city, the man before whom criminals lowered their voices, looked out at the cold night and then looked back at her and said the truest thing he had ever said. For the first time in my whole life, he said, I have no idea, and it's the best feeling I've ever had. Noah's surgery took place 2 days later, exactly as scheduled. Emily sat in the waiting room for 6 hours, and Adrian sat beside her the entire time, and neither of them said much, but he was there, and that was everything. When the surgeon finally came out tired and smiling and told Emily that the operation had been a complete success, that her brother's heart was repaired, that he was going to live a full and normal life, Emily broke down completely, and Adrian caught her and held her and let her cry into his shoulder for as long as she needed. He's going to be okay, she kept saying over and over. He's really going to be okay. He's going to be okay, Adrian agreed, and Emily felt something wet against her hair and realized with a shock that the man everyone had called a monster was crying too. Noah recovered fast the way the young do. Within weeks he was walking, then laughing, then eating everything in sight and complaining about being bored, which Emily realized was the most beautiful sound in the entire world, a healthy teenager complaining about being bored. Color returned to his face. He grew that spring nearly 2 inches, as if his body had been waiting all his life for permission to finally be well. And Adrian stayed, not in a way anyone would have predicted. He didn't move in. He didn't take over their lives. He didn't try to buy Emily's affection or control her choices, because he understood better than anyone that the thing that made her extraordinary was precisely that she could not be bought or controlled. Instead, he simply quietly became part of their world. He'd come by in the evenings. He'd bring groceries and pretend it was nothing. He'd sit at the kitchen table and help Noah with homework, and the boy who had every reason to be wary of him came to adore him because Adrian treated Noah not like a sick kid to be pitied, but like a young man to be taken seriously. Emily watched it happen, this slow thaw, this careful reawakening of a man who had frozen himself solid decades ago to survive. She watched Adrian Blackwell rediscover, one small, ordinary moment at a time, the things his empire had cost him. The taste of a home-cooked meal eaten with people who wanted nothing from him. The sound of a teenager's laughter. The simple, staggering luxury of being able to trust the people in the room. I forgot, he told her one evening watching Noah do dishes and sing badly to himself in the kitchen. I forgot that this existed. This kind of ordinary happiness. I spent so long protecting an empire that I forgot the empire was never worth a single night like this. You had to protect it, Emily said gently. You didn't know. No, Adrian agreed. I didn't know, until a waitress refused to let me die in the rain and then refused to sell me for her own brother's life and showed me that everything I'd believed about people my whole life was wrong. He looked at her, and his eyes were soft in a way that would have been unimaginable the night she dragged him out of that parking lot. You didn't just save my life, Emily. You saved the man inside it, the one Victor buried 20 years ago. I thought he was gone. You dug him back out. Emily went back to school. That was the part she could hardly believe. With Noah healthy and the constant terror of poverty finally lifting, she was able at last to pick up the dream she'd abandoned years before. She re-enrolled. She studied finance. The thing she'd always been brilliant at, the thing that had, in the strangest twist of all, helped bring down one of the most powerful criminals in the city. Adrian supported her, but he never once tried to make her choices for her. When she got her first exam back with a perfect score, she called him before she called anyone else, and he was so proud she could hear it cracking his voice over the phone. She asked him once near the end of that first year why he'd never tried to make her owe him anything. Why, with all his money and all his history of controlling everyone around him, he'd been so careful never to hold anything over her. Because the only thing you ever gave me, Adrian said, you gave for free. And the moment I try to buy it or trade for it or control it, I destroy the only real thing I've ever had. You loved a stranger enough to save him for no reason at all. That's not something you can purchase. It's the one thing in this whole world Victor was wrong about, and I would rather die than turn it into a transaction. Emily thought about that for a long time, and she understood that in saving Adrian, she had given him more than his life. She had given him back his belief in something. She had proven to a man who had lost everyone that not everyone was for sale. And in doing so, she had given him the one gift that all his money and power never could have bought. The years that followed were good ones. Noah grew up strong and healthy and went off to college himself, the thing his sister had never once let herself believe was possible on all those desperate nights doing the same impossible math. Emily finished her degree and then went further and built a career on the very talent she'd once had to bury to survive. And Adrian, the man who had walked away from an empire, found something in that ordinary life that his empire had never given him for a single day. Peace, belonging, a home. Emily had believed that cold night in the parking lot that saving Adrian Blackwell would destroy her life. She'd been certain of it even as she dragged him through the rain. She had thought she was throwing everything away for a stranger. Instead, that single act of kindness had saved them both. Because the truth she came to understand, the truth that sat at the very heart of everything that happened, was this. When she found Adrian that night, she'd thought she was rescuing the man lying helpless on the ground. But the person who truly needed rescuing was not the one who was dying. It was the one who had everything, money and power and a whole city's fear, and yet had no one in all the world who truly saw his heart. Victor had spent 20 years proving that everyone could be bought. Emily spent one cold night proving him wrong, and that single proof was worth more than every dollar Adrian had ever counted. A person's worth is never measured by their money, their status, or their power. It is measured by the choices they make when life gives them every reason to abandon their kindness. Emily Carter had every reason in the world to walk away, and every reason to sell a man's life for her brother's, and she refused both. And in refusing, she saved not one life but 3, including her own, including her. One small act of compassion offered freely to a stranger in the rain changed everything. It brought down an empire built on betrayal. It freed a man from a cage he'd lived in for 20 years. It gave a dying boy his whole life back. And it proved once and forever that the most powerful force in this world is not fear and not money and not power. It is a single human being who chooses to do the right thing when everything is telling them not to. And that is a kind of wealth no one can ever take away. 3 years after the night everything changed, Emily Carter stood in a lecture hall she never thought she'd see from the front and realized she had become someone she wouldn't have recognized in that cold parking lot. She was there to give a talk. A small thing, really, a guest lecture for first-year finance students at the university where she'd finally finished her degree. The professor who'd invited her had introduced her as one of the most gifted forensic accounting minds the program had ever produced, and Emily had wanted to laugh because 5 years ago, that same mind had been used to calculate whether she could afford both rent and her brother's medicine in the same week. She looked out at the rows of young faces, students who had no idea who she was or where she'd come from, and she thought about the strange, impossible road that had carried her here. She talked to them about following money, about how numbers never lie even when the people behind them do, about how the truth always leaves a trail if you know how to read it. And near the end, one student, a serious young woman in the back row, raised her hand and asked what had made Emily want to go into this work in the first place. Emily was quiet for a moment. She couldn't tell them the real answer. She couldn't tell them that she'd once used these exact skills to bring down one of the most powerful criminals in the city in an abandoned warehouse in the middle of a gunfight. That version of her story would never be spoken out loud, protected forever by an immunity a dying man had traded his entire empire to secure. So instead, she said something simpler and truer. "Because I learned the hard way that the world tries to convince you that some people don't matter," she said. "That poor people, sick people, people with no power, that their lives are worth less. And I decided I was going to spend my life proving that's a lie. The numbers don't care how much money you have, justice shouldn't either." The room was very quiet when she finished, And afterward, packing up her things, she felt her phone buzz, and she looked down and smiled, because it was Adrian. "How did it go?" his message read. "I think I made a fool of myself," she wrote back. "Impossible," he replied. "You've never made a fool of yourself in your life. Noah's here. He made pasta. He burned it. Come home and help me pretend it's edible." Emily laughed out loud right there in the empty lecture hall, and the sound of it surprised her because there had been so many years when laughter had felt like a luxury she couldn't afford. She gathered her things, and she went home to the life that had somehow, against every odd, become hers. Home was not the tiny apartment anymore, but it was not a palace either, and that had been a deliberate choice. When the dust of Victor's downfall had finally settled, Adrian had found himself for the first time in his adult life an ordinary man. Most of his fortune was gone, surrendered or seized, or given away in the deal that had saved Emily and Noah. What remained was modest enough to be comfortable, not enough to be a king, and Adrian had discovered to his own quiet astonishment that he preferred it that way. A man with a kingdom always has something to defend. A man with a home only has something to enjoy. They had bought a house together, the three of them, a real house on a quiet street with trees. The kind of house Emily used to walk past as a girl and imagine living in. It had taken them both a long time to talk about what they were to each other. Neither of them was good at that kind of conversation. Adrian had spent his whole life unable to trust, and Emily had spent hers unable to lean on anyone, and two people like that don't fall into things easily. But over the years, the wariness had worn away, worn down by 1,000 ordinary evenings, and somewhere along the line, the distance between them had simply disappeared, and neither of them could have said exactly when. Noah, of course, had figured it out long before either of them admitted it. "You two are ridiculous," he'd told Emily one night years back when he was 17 and healthy and insufferable in the way healthy 17-year-olds are. "You look at him like he hung the moon, and he looks at you like you invented it. Just get married already so I can stop watching this." "Mind your own business," Emily had said, turning red. "You are my business," Noah had said. "You spent your whole life making me your business. Now it's my turn." And then more gently, in a rare moment of the seriousness that his illness had carved into him, "Young, he's a good man, Em. I know where he came from. I know what he used to be. But I've watched him for years now. He'd walk into fire for you, for both of us. And he never once asked for anything back." He'd shrugged. "That's the whole thing, isn't it? That's what you always said. You measure a person by what they do when they don't have to." Emily had never forgotten that. Because her little brother, the boy she'd nearly lost, had understood the moral of her entire life better than she had. They did get married eventually. It was a small ceremony, almost embarrassingly small, just a handful of people in a garden on a warm afternoon. Ray was there, the loyal man who'd received the evidence that ended Victor, the one person from Adrian's old life who'd stayed. A few of Emily's friends from school. Noah standing up as best man, healthy and grinning and taller now than Adrian, which he never let anyone forget. There were no crowds, no spectacle, no display of power. Adrian Blackwell, who had once commanded a city, was married in a borrowed suit under a tree, and he told Emily afterward that it was the only day of his life he could remember being purely, uncomplicatedly happy. "I spent 50 years afraid," he said to her that night, "every single day. Afraid of enemies, afraid of betrayal, afraid of losing what I'd built. I never even noticed I was afraid because I'd never known anything else. And then you dragged me out of the rain, and somewhere along the way the fear just stopped." He shook his head slowly, wonderingly. "I don't know how to explain what it's like to not be afraid after 50 years. It's like being born." But the story didn't end at a wedding the way stories are supposed to, because life kept going the way it does, and it brought things Emily never could have anticipated. The first came about a year after they married. Emily had built a career by then, respected, established, working as a forensic accountant for a firm that specialized in untangling exactly the kind of financial deception she'd once uncovered by candlelight in her old apartment. And one afternoon, a case landed on her desk that made her blood run cold because it involved a family, a mother and two small children being systematically defrauded and terrorized by people who were stealing everything they had through a web of fake companies and hidden accounts. It was in almost every detail a smaller version of what Victor had done, and the mother in the case reminded Emily achingly of herself, poor, cornered, certain that no one would ever help because no one ever had. Emily took the case apart with a fury that surprised even her colleagues. She traced every dollar. She exposed every lie. She built a wall of evidence so complete that the people responsible had no possible defense, and she did not rest until that family had every cent restored and their tormentors were facing justice. And when it was over, the mother came to Emily's office, this stranger, this woman she'd never met, and simply held her hands and wept and said she didn't understand why Emily had fought so hard for people who were nobody. "Because someone once fought for me when I was nobody," Emily told her. "And I made a promise a long time ago that if I ever got the chance, I'd do the same. There are no nobodies. There's just people the world hasn't decided to see yet." She came home that night and told Adrian about it, and he listened the way he always listened completely. And when she finished, he was quiet for a while. "You know what you're doing, don't you?" he finally said. "What am I doing?" "You're paying it forward. You saved me, and instead of stopping there, you turned it into a way of life. Every one of those people you fight for, that's another version of the woman who dragged me out of the rain." He looked at her with something that was close to awe even after all these years. "You didn't just save one man, Emily. You've been saving people ever since. You made your whole life into that one choice over and over." Emily hadn't thought of it that way, but he was right. And that was the moment she decided what she really wanted to do with the strange gift her life had become. She and Adrian started a foundation, a real one, nothing like the poison thing Victor had once dangled in front of her in a hospital hallway. This one was built to do exactly what its name would never announce, which was to find the people the world had written off, the families crushed by debt. They didn't create the sick children whose parents were being told their lives weren't worth saving, the ordinary people cornered by forces too powerful to fight alone and to fight for them. Emily ran the financial side, tracing the money, exposing the fraud, forcing the restitution. Adrian, drawing on a lifetime of knowing exactly how powerful people operated and exactly where they were vulnerable, handled the parts that required a different kind of knowledge. It was, Adrian noted with grim amusement one day, the same set of skills they'd used to destroy Victor, only now they were using them to build instead of to burn. 20 years I used everything I knew to take from people," he said. "And now I get to spend the rest of my life using the same knowledge to give it back. There's a symmetry to that I don't deserve, but I'll take it." "You do deserve it," Emily said. "That's the whole point. People can change. That's the thing Victor never understood. He thought everyone was fixed, that everyone was just their price. But people change, Adrian. You did. You're the proof." The foundation grew. It helped hundreds of families, then thousands. And it did something Emily hadn't expected, which was that it slowly, quietly changed the way people talked about Adrian Blackwell. His name had once been spoken in fear, a name that made criminals lower their voices. Now, in a different set of circles among people who had been saved from ruin, they'd never even understood was happening to them. His name came to mean something else entirely. It came to mean rescue. It came to mean that somebody had shown up when no one else would. He never got used to that. He told Emily once that the first time a stranger stopped him on the street and thanked him with tears in her eyes for saving her father's home, he'd had to walk into an alley afterward and stand there for 10 minutes because he didn't know what to do with the feeling. He'd spent his whole life being feared. He had no idea how to be loved by strangers. "I keep waiting for it to feel like a trick," he confessed. "Like there's a catch. 50 years of my life kindness always had a catch. Someone always wanted something. And now people just thank me for nothing, for giving, and some part of me still doesn't believe it's real." "It's real," Emily told him. "You just had it backwards your whole life. You thought kindness was the trick and cruelty was the truth. It was always the other way around." There was one more thing, though. One piece of the past that neither of them had ever fully put down, and it came back to them in a way Emily would remember for the rest of her life. Victor Hale spent the rest of his days in prison. The evidence Emily had uncovered was so total, so damning, that there had never been any real chance of anything else. The empire he'd spent 20 years stealing had collapsed into nothing his allies had scattered, and the man who'd believed everyone in the world could be bought had discovered that no amount of money could buy his way out of the walls that held him. He grew old there, bitter, forgotten by the very people who'd once feared him. And then one day, years into their new life, a letter arrived. It was from the prison. It was from Victor. Emily found Adrian holding it in the kitchen, staring at it, and she understood at once what it was, because she saw on his face a shadow of the old pain, the wound that had shaped his entire existence, the brother Victor had killed 20 years before and then pretended to mourn. "You don't have to read it," Emily said quietly. "I know," Adrian said, "but I think I need to." He opened it, and Emily watched him read, watched his face move through something complicated and deep, and when he finished, he set the letter down and was silent for a long time. "What did it say?" she finally asked. "He's dying," Adrian said. "The doctors have given him months. He wrote to me because," he paused, "because he wanted to explain, not apologize. Victor doesn't know how to apologize, but to explain. He wrote that he never expected to lose, that in 20 years of planning he had accounted for every variable, every enemy, every possibility, except one. He never accounted for someone doing something for no reason at all. He never accounted for a person who couldn't be bought." Adrian looked up at her. "He wrote that in the end, the thing that destroyed him wasn't me and it wasn't the law. It was you, a waitress who refused a bribe. He said he spent every day in here trying to understand it, and he still can't. He said he wanted me to know that he died not understanding the one thing that beat him." Emily's throat was tight. "Are you going to write back?" Adrian thought about it for a long moment, and then he shook his head slowly. "No," he said. "There's nothing to say. He wanted me to hate him or forgive him some final transaction, some last exchange. He needs it to be about him even now, even at the end." He looked down at the letter. "But it was never about him. Not really. My whole life stopped being about Victor Hale the night a stranger decided I was worth saving. He just took 20 years to become irrelevant, and he'll die never knowing that he already lost the thing he cared about most, which was mattering to me. He doesn't. Not anymore." And Adrian took the letter, and without any drama, without any ceremony, he dropped it into the trash. And Emily understood that she had just watched a man finally completely set down a weight he'd carried for 30 years. The wound that had made him cold, the betrayal that had frozen his heart, the ghost of a murdered brother he'd never been able to lay to rest. All of it gone released not through revenge, because he'd had his revenge, and it had changed nothing, but through the simple decision that it no longer had any power over him. "He was wrong about one thing," Emily said softly. "He said I destroyed him because I couldn't be bought, but that's not really why." "No, he wasn't destroyed because I refused the bribe," Emily said. "He was destroyed because you changed. If you were still the man he thought you were, the cold one, the one who trusted no one, you would have died in that parking lot, and no evidence would have mattered. What beat him was that you let yourself trust one person. After a lifetime of trusting no one, you trusted me. That's what he could never have predicted. Not my choice, yours." She reached out and took his hand. "You saved yourself, Adrian. I just opened the door." Adrian looked at her for a long moment, and then he did something he almost never did, even after all these years. He pulled her into his arms and held her tightly the way a man holds the one thing he was never supposed to have. "Do you know what I think about?" he murmured into her hair. "Sometimes late at night when I can't sleep, I think about how close it came to not happening. If your shift had ended 5 minutes earlier, you'd have been gone before they ever pulled me out of that car. If it had ended 5 minutes later, they'd have finished and left before you got there. It was 5 minutes, Emily. My whole life, everything I have, everything I am now, all of it came down to 5 minutes and one waitress who was too kind to walk away." He pulled back and looked at her. "The most powerful man in the city, and I owe my entire existence to a coincidence of timing and the goodness of a stranger. There's a lesson in that. I've spent years trying to put it into words." "You don't have to put it into words," Emily said. "You just have to live it, which you do, every day." Years passed, and they were good years, the kind of years Emily had never once let herself imagine, on all those desperate nights. Noah graduated from college, then went on to medical school, and no one who knew his story was surprised because a boy whose life had been saved when everyone said it couldn't be grew into a young man determined to do the same for others. He became a cardiologist. He specialized in exactly the condition that had nearly killed him, treating children whose families couldn't afford care, funded quietly by his sister's foundation. The circle of it, the way one act of kindness had rippled outward across so many lives, was something Emily thought about often, and it never stopped amazing her. "You know what the wild thing is?" Noah said to her, once both of them grown, now sitting on the porch of the house on the quiet street with the trees. "None of this exists if you walk away that night. Not my life, not my career, not the kids I've treated, not the foundation, not Adrian being whatever he is now, a good man. All of it, everything hangs on one waitress deciding not to mind her own business." He shook his head. "You always told me you were nobody, Em. You spent my whole childhood apologizing for not being able to give me more. And it turns out you gave the whole world more just by being exactly who you are." Emily didn't have an answer for that. She just reached over and squeezed her brother's hand, this healthy, brilliant, alive man who had once been a dying boy with blue lips, and she felt the entire weight of the life they'd almost never had press against her heart. And she was grateful, so deeply grateful, that some part of her on the worst and most exhausted night of her life had refused to let a stranger die alone in the rain. Adrian grew old in the end. That's what happens even to the men a whole city once feared. His hair went silver, then white. He slowed down, but he did it in a way Emily found unbearably beautiful, because he did it as a man at peace, a man who had made his amends and found his home, and spent the last chapter of his life giving back everything he'd once taken. He never stopped being surprised by his own happiness. Even in his final years, he would sometimes look around at the life they'd built, the house, the family, the work that helped people, and he'd get a look on his face, like a man who still couldn't quite believe he was allowed to have it. "I keep thinking I'll wake up," he told Emily near the end, "back in that parking lot, and it'll all have been a dream a dying man has in his last few seconds. Because that's the truth of it, isn't it? I was supposed to die that night. Everything after was borrowed time, every single day of it, and I never wasted a day of it because I always knew it was borrowed. That's the gift you gave me, Emily. Not just the years, the knowing that every day was one I wasn't supposed to have. Do you know how beautiful a life is when you live it that way? When every ordinary day is a miracle you weren't owed." Emily held his hand, and there were tears in her eyes, and she said, "You gave that gift right back. You just don't see it. Every person that foundation saved, every family that got their life back, every child Noah treated. That's all borrowed time, too. You spent your borrowed days giving other people theirs. That's the most anyone can do with a life." He smiled at her. Then the smile she'd first glimpsed all those years ago over a plate of eggs. The smile of the man buried deep inside the monster. Everyone had feared the man she'd spent a lifetime coaxing back into the light. "We saved each other," he said. "In the end, that's the whole story, isn't it? You thought you were saving a stranger. I thought you were saving my life. But we were saving each other. From the rain, from the fear, from a world that told us both we were only worth what we could give or take." He squeezed her hand with what strength he had left. And the answer was neither. We were worth the choice to be kind when it cost us everything. That was always the only thing that mattered. When Adrian died, it was peacefully in the house on the quiet street with Emily beside him and Noah nearby and the last light of a soft evening coming through the window. He was not afraid. He hadn't been afraid in decades. His last words to Emily were simple, and she carried them for the rest of her life. "Thank you," he said, "for not walking away." And Emily, holding the hand of the man she had dragged out of the rain a lifetime ago, the most feared man in Chicago, who had become the gentlest presence in her world, whispered back the only thing there was to say. "Thank you," she said, "for being worth staying for." The foundation went on after him. It went on for decades, long past Emily's own life carried forward by Noah and then by others. An unbroken chain of people fighting for the people the world had forgotten, all of it, flowing outward from a single choice, made by a single exhausted waitress on a single cold night, when every reason in the world told her to keep walking, and she didn't. Because that is the truth that outlasts everything. Empires fall, fortunes vanish, the powerful are forgotten, and the feared become footnotes. But one act of kindness offered freely to a stranger who could give nothing back ripples outward through time in ways no one can measure, saving lives that save other lives, on and on, long after the person who started it is gone. Emily Carter was a poor waitress who had nothing, and she gave the only thing she had, which was her refusal to let another human being suffer alone. And that gift, worth nothing on the night she gave it, turned out to be worth more than every dollar in every account Victor Hale ever hid, more than the entire empire Adrian Blackwell ever built. She proved with her whole life the thing the powerful never understand and the kind never forget, that a person's worth is not measured in money or status or the fear they can command. It is measured in the choices they make when the world gives them every reason to abandon their kindness and they choose to hold on to it anyway. One woman refused to walk away, and because of that, 3 lives were saved, and then thousands more, and a man who was supposed to die in the rain instead died in a home he loved, surrounded by a family he never thought he'd have, whispering thank you. That is the whole story. And it is the truest thing there is.